Lovers of lore, thank you for joining me for another installment of Magic the Gathering lore. Today we're going to be talking about how Wrenn and 6 became Wrenn and 7. Wrenn and 6 had just returned to Innistrad. They were a very unlikely looking pair. Wrenn, frail, pale, white-haired, and 6, a hulking tree folk with gigantic wooden limbs. They had returned to Innistrad because it was 6's birthplace, and he was weary of journeying with Wrenn. Wrenn had agreed to return him to his home, the Kessig Forest. This was a melancholy experience for her and laced with pain. She dreaded the impending separation. She had been with 6 for some time now, and dryads are always more comfortable when they're linked with a tree. These partings were always difficult to deal with, sometimes by choice, and sometimes she was forced to leave a tree's heart involuntarily and quite abruptly. That had actually happened with 4 who had succumbed to battle wounds. So at least this time, she could prepare for the coming immensity of aloneness she would feel. But in a way, this was harder, because she knew that 6 could keep going, but he was choosing to end their journey together. She considered herself and her host to be a team, and she listened to the tree's desires. 6 spoke to her of where he wished to take root as they walked together for the last time, each step taking Wrenn closer to the inevitable. When they reached the chosen spot, together they wound their roots deep into Kessig's soil. At the same time, Wrenn began to unwind herself from 6. She felt a fading awareness of him as she pulled herself free. As the separation completed, taking a look at 6, you wouldn't be able to guess he was ever a tree folk, especially not just moments ago. 6 looked like any other healthy Innistrad oak tree, with strong branches reaching into the sky. She leaned against the tree, feeling his dwindling presence, and promised to return to offer 6's offspring the same choice that he had accepted. She spoke of how 6's saplings would be proud and powerful. In response, only silence. 6 said nothing. The connection was gone. A part of Wrenn yearned to leap back inside the oak tree, but she pushed the thought aside. The choice had been made. Smiling up at the tree, she departed to find 7. She spent many hours searching the Kessig Forest, following the irresistible tug of tree song, the tool that she used to locate suitable hosts. She had forgotten just how much she disliked this process, unaccustomed to having to walk with her own legs. Her feet and her legs had grown sore from the movement. The tree song she sought would match the resonance of the tree Wrenn had been born from. The tree song she followed was the right one, but it was muted somehow. It was either coming from a great distance, or possibly the tree itself was weakened or a sapling. This caused doubt to gnaw at her further. Maybe she should have stayed with 6 until she had found a new suitable host. But ultimately, that would have been unfair. Her thoughts were interrupted by snapping twigs. Someone or something was nearby. Whirling around, she saw a man in blue robes wielding a crooked staff. The mage bowed, but she did not trust him. He politely inquired after her health and offered to help her. Wrenn was wary. She had been tricked before. She barked back at the mage, "Keep your distance. I am not defenseless." The mage responded, "I'm not seeking confrontation. The local villagers in this area believe you to be a witch, but you don't appear to have ill intent." He introduced himself as Teferi. Wrenn was surprised. She had actually heard of this mage wandering other worlds. She decided to extend a little bit of trust. "I'm seeking a tree." Teferi smiled and gestured towards the surrounding forest. "Take your pick." Wrenn's half-despondent reply was, "None of these are the tree I seek." Teferi had a puzzled look on his face. "Aren't you already linked with a tree? Aren't all dryads bound in such a way?" Sadness crossed Wrenn's face as she explained, "A great inferno burned the forest that my people come from. Somehow when it reached me, I was able to consume it and draw it into me, but it burns within to this day. Somehow this inferno gave me the ability to join with new trees and unbound me from my world. I've traveled to many worlds with my tree companions, and I'm seeking my 7th host. Teferi offered to be of assistance, and Wrenn decided that she would take him up on his offer, and together they walked off seeking the tree song. After a while of wandering, a look of frustration passed over Teferi's face. Something had been shadowing him the entire time he'd been in the Kessig forest. Wrenn sensed his discomfort and asked if danger lurked nearby. Teferi spun around. "Show yourself!" In response, the woods grew darker, and a feeling of hatred was so thick that it hung in the air around them. Wrenn's eyes narrowed. "This is no thing of the woodlands. I hear no song from it." Once again, Teferi demanded, "Show yourself!" This time he accompanied the words with a spell. An azure glow surrounded Teferi, and a moment later their pursuer appeared. Shaggy hair covered it from head to toe. Claws as long as a man's head held dangerous menace. Its face was hairless and withered like an old crone, and its eyes glowed with unnatural light. The horror charged towards them. Teferi cast a spell meant to whip the creature through time and away from them, but somehow the magic flowed around the thing. The situation was more serious than he had anticipated. He used more powerful magic this time. This spell was enough and did the trick. The grotesque beast faltered in its charge and then disappeared in a foul miasma. Wrenn turned on Teferi, anger flaring. "Look at what you've done to the woods!" Teferi glanced around. The forest had been transformed. Where once a crooked but somewhat straight path took them through the Kessig, now a maze of identical paths branched out in every direction, and he could feel the presence of his time magic everywhere. Something about that creature had warped his castings. Wrenn was livid. "It's gone! The only hope I had is gone!" The despair filled the pit of Wrenn's stomach. She could no longer feel that faint tree song calling out to her. And more importantly, she could hear no other tree song with the proper resonance. Her time was running out. Teferi was apologetic. "Can we find you another tree while I untangle this mess I've made?" Wrenn angrily agreed, and they progressed through the forest. And as time went on, both planeswalkers became more frustrated. The time magic that lingered here felt very similar to Teferi. The magic was familiar in a way that reminded him of home. It was very much like the spell he had used to spirit away his homeland Zhalfir. And much like Zhalfir, he could not puzzle out how to fix the situation. It was apparent Wrenn was growing weaker. Her anger had faded, but she complained of going in circles. Teferi countered, "Not so. We have only been going south this entire time." Wrenn lamented, "This is not how I expected my life to end." Once again, Teferi apologized for his spell misfiring and said, "Have you never had a spell misfire?" Wrenn's response was impatient. "Of course I have, but I just undo them when it happens." Teferi was stunned. Undo them? Undo them how? Wrenn looked equally as confused as Teferi. How did this planeswalker not understand something so simple? How is it possible that he wouldn't know how to pick apart his own spell? She explained as she would to a child. You start at the roots. You find where the spell has become tangled, and you pull it apart. Can you grasp your spell? Teferi shook his head. He had no concept of how to actually grasp his spell. At that point, Wrenn attuned nature magic to Teferi, and it swirled all around him. She encouraged him, "Try again." This time, Teferi was able to grasp the fringes of his errant spell. She guided him. Find the place where the spell's harmony fails. To Teferi, this made no sense. His magic did not have the naturally occurring harmony she spoke of. But as he stared intently at the spell, he did find the smallest fraction of fractured time, like a pocket watch that only needed the least bit of winding to run on perfect time. Without Wrenn's aid, he would never have noticed something this minute. He peeled back the spell at the fracture point. Inside, it felt like a smashed clock. He reached inside and repaired the clock, musing that perhaps this sort of unmaking would be useful in the future. All around him, the world whipped about, restoring itself to the natural forest. The corrupted time magic's presence and influence was gone. Teferi's face brightened. Perhaps you can help me restore my homeland. But Wrenn wasn't listening anymore. She was intently staring behind him. Expecting the worst, Teferi turned around, but there was nothing there, nothing but the Kessig forest. Wrenn brushed past him like he didn't even exist. She was focused on a giant, healthy oak tree. She started to whistle, and to Teferi, it sounded like birdsong. Wrenn paused in front of the tree, then abruptly leapt forwards and into the tree. She disappeared with a ripple like someone diving into a lake, and then there was nothing of her, just the tree. Teferi's concern carried him forwards towards the oak tree, when suddenly Wrenn reappeared, the top half of her torso sticking comically up out of the tree. A giant smile creased her face. "You have done me a great service." Teferi was puzzled. Wrenn disappeared once again into the tree, but this time the tree itself came to life, uprooting itself. Giant arms of oak and giant oaken legs formed out of the wood. And once again, Wrenn popped out. Teferi had puzzled a part of it out. This must be the sapling that she had heard through the earlier tree song. Wrenn confirmed this by explaining the sapling knew and felt her need, and when Teferi's time magic went awry, the tree itself actually fed on the time magic to accelerate its growth and rapidly mature so that it would be able to aid Wrenn and explore the multiverse with her. Wrenn said, "Seven is grateful for your help, but we must away." And with that, Wrenn and Seven strode out of the Kessig woods and into the blind eternities. Well, my friends, that ends this installment of Magic the Gathering lore. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you enjoy the work that we're doing here, then consider supporting us on Patreon or by joining the channel membership. Thanks for coming by. I'll see you all for the next lore video. And remember, my friends, lore is life.